Well, thank you very much. I don't know if everyone can hear me. That's the first thing I should really ask. I'm Alasdair, Allan, MSP. I'm chairing this part of the meeting. I'd like to welcome everybody to this joint meeting of the Scottish Parliament's the Scottish Parliament's cross-party group on Malawi and the UK Parliament's all-party group on Malawi. I think this is only the second time that we've done this collectively. But it's, I think, certainly a very welcome event, and one I'd like to welcome everyone to. Now, I'm conscious that there might be a number of technical issues we have to mention just to make the technology work, but I think it's worth saying before going any further to wish people in Malawi today a happy Independence Day. We realise it's we're very grateful for people in Malawi coming to spend time with us on a day of national celebration, although as in many other countries, a difficult day as well. So we appreciate very much the time that you're giving. I'd also, on the theme of I mentioned of the technical issues, I think the main thing to mention is that we're very grateful that such senior people could join us, but because of the constraints on us, we will have to politely ask if people could keep their contributions to around 4 minutes, and if we get to 5 minutes, I'm afraid there may be interventions or interruptions, and that unpopular task is one I'm going to delegate to David Hope-Jones of the Scotland-Malawi Partnership. So if you hear him interrupting, I'm afraid it's just because we've reached our time limit. I think the other thing I want to mention from a technical point of view is that if people could keep muted, keep the mute button on if they're not making a contribution, just to avoid interference. And also, if we're beginning to suffer from problems on the bandwidth front, it may be helpful to switch your video off as well if you're not speaking at that point. Also, to check that people have, as I think they do, their names up on Zoom. If not, then if you press the rename button, then you can update, as I just have, your name so that everyone can see who you are. I've got apologies to begin with from Kenny McCaskill, MSP, Lord Steele, Deirdre Brock, MP, and Elaine Smith, MSP. I won't go through minutes of the last meeting as it's rather confusing when there's 2 parliaments and 3 houses involved, but I do believe, I don't know if they can identify themselves or not, that we are expecting at the UK end Patrick Grady MP, Alex Norris MP, Margaret Ferrier MP, Alan Dorans MP, okay, Neil Hanvey MP, Anne McLaughlin MP, Tony Lloyd MP. Oh, there we are. Lord McConnell, Wendy Chamberlain MP have all indicated they might be present. So it's kind of difficult to identify ourselves in this format, but perhaps some of you are there. And at the Scottish Parliament end, apart from myself, Alasdair Allan, we hope we might have Liam MacArthur, Maureen Watt, Sarah Boyack, Stuart McMillan, Alexander Stewart, and Linda Fabiani to represent the Scottish Parliament. So I hear some people identifying themselves, so I should be quiet for a second and let people put their hands up or say anything they want to say. But I think probably, since time's marching on, we'll move into our speakers. Now, the first speaker we have, we're very pleased indeed to have Mr. Sam Alfandika, the Chief Executive of the Malawi Electoral Commission. And of course, Malawi has been in the news with the rerun of the presidential elections. And I believe that Mr. Alfandika has served through both the recent presidential elections in his role, and I think brought great credit to the process as well. So we'll be very pleased to hear from Mr. Alfandika if he's there, and look forward to hearing his observations on recent events in Malawi.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. And good evening to all members of Parliament, the honourables. It's great to be with you. I'll be very brief because I've been given 4 minutes. First, to say that the elections in Malawi were implemented under court order. So there was no negotiation in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic and whether the elections should be conducted or not. Suffice to say that there was the will from the populace, the voters, that this election should take place because it was believed that after the court determination, the political impasse had to be concluded or had to be eliminated through the ballot. So everybody was keen to ensure that the elections take place, though under the COVID-19 environment. So the Electoral Commission had no choice. So it had to implement the elections under that environment. Just to give a background in terms of the COVID-19 situation, as of April 2, we had the first case of COVID-19 in Malawi. As of June 2nd, 2020, we had 358 cases. But as of yesterday, 5th July, 2020, we had 1,742 cases with 19 deaths. So you can see how exponentially the COVID-19 has spread. In terms of implementation of the electoral process, the Electoral Commission ensured that all measures were taken to prevent the further spread of COVID-19, but this did not apply to contesting political parties. All parties did not adhere to COVID-19 preventive measures. The physical distances were not observed. There were no preventive clothing like face masks, no washing of hands most of the times, and that did not make an impact even if the Electoral Commission was observant to the measures. With regard to what the Electoral Commission did was to ensure that we have the face masks, we had the hand sanitizers for both trainings and even those voters who were interacting with during the entire electoral process. It was very expensive to procure these materials. At the same time, we had to observe a new way of implementing some of the activities like the civic and voter education, where we did not use crowd pooling ways of civic educating people. And then we also had to ensure that trainings had to observe the preventive measures of less than 100 numbers of gatherings per time. So trainings were expensive. Transportation was expensive as well because we needed to transport everybody who was involved in a 1 meter distance kind of measure. So we had a lot of challenges during the implementation, and we needed extra funds to implement the election under the COVID-19 measures. Enforcement was sometimes difficult because we were not the only stakeholder implementing this process. There were political parties, as I said, and other stakeholders as well. So the Electoral Commission was not in a position to enforce the rest of the stakeholders to adhere to the COVID-19 pandemic preventive measures. It wasn't also impossible for other players like international observers to come into Malawi to observe this election. Suffice to say that we had the resident international observers who came to, who were around to observe on behalf of their governments as well as their international bodies. In conclusion, I should say that despite the COVID-19 pandemic situation in Malawi, the Commission ensured that all activities for the fresh presidential election had been successfully implemented. The voter turnout was 64.81% compared to the previous 74% in 2019. The now and void votes were 1.26% compared to the 1.54% in 2019. And the Commission is fully satisfied that the electoral process was credible and that the result was a true reflection of the will of the people of Malawi. Most importantly, the outcome of the election has not been disputed by any of the contestants. So in brief, that is what happened in Malawi. The numbers of COVID-19 cases have increased, maybe due to elections, but we have to really think through, do an analysis to find out whether indeed it's because of elections, because in our surrounding countries like Zambia, the numbers have also exponentially increased. So it's a question of looking at other factors than the elections themselves in terms of what has contributed to this exponential increase. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much indeed. That was very interesting to see how the issue of COVID is inseparable from the issue of the running of the election. We look forward to hearing a media perspective on perhaps both of those themes now. Mr. George Kasakula, who's the chief editor of Times Television, looking at my notes here, he's a Chevening scholar, one of Malawi's most respected journalists, and has a media perspective, as I say, on the recent elections. My notes also say that his media group also recently stole the show from Boris Johnson, so I'm intrigued to hear what that means too. So we look forward to working with him, hearing from him, and welcome him to the panel now.
Thank you very much, and good evening, and welcome everybody. For the reasons that the Chief Elections Officer has just highlighted, this was an interesting election to cover, because, as he said, it's an election that was court-ordered. It's an election that is coming, not during the normal cycle of elections. We hold them every 5 years. We're supposed to hold another one, 2024, but here we are holding 2020, and then that means the cycle has changed. But quite an interesting election to cover. From the perspective of the media, we tried our best to give them, proper coverage, especially the independent media. The public media, Malawi Broadcasting Corporation, it is always difficult because normally it aligns itself with the party or the candidate that is the president. But for us, the private media, Times Group and others, Zodiac, Nation, I think we try to give them, proper objective coverage so that they reach out to the people. As the CEO has said, it was a difficult election happening during time of COVID. So what it meant was that more or less most of the campaigning, yes, the parties and the candidates went out to campaign, and their supporters went out to campaign. But I think what we saw is a continuation of last year's trend, where the candidates, the major candidates, were buying airtime on TV. So that apart from gathering people, but they should also speak to people through TV. So that continued from last year, and it was quite an interesting. Come the voting day itself, the polling day itself, it was a nice election to cover from the point of view of the media, because it was only presidential. So only presidential, and the way it was organized in such a way that the make chairperson, Justice Dr. Jifundo Kechali, made it very clear that when they have finished counting at polling centers, and then they should declare the results and probably paste them where everybody can see them. And then when those results have been taken to the district tally centers, they should also, declare them. So what as a media, it was very easy to cover. In fact, we declared the election. We called the elections out probably 2, 3, 4 days before MEC officially announced the elections. The good thing is that the chairperson was very, very, very emphatic that we are free to announce the results, as long as we put a disclaimer that this is not official. So for us, like Times Group, we even wrote, I think 2 or 3 days before the official announcement, that Dr. Chancellor has won the election. It was so because of the fact that it was very easy to get the figures. I think the key thing that happened in this election, as far as the media is concerned, is the transparency that the commission displayed. They were very, very transparent. They made sure that all the laws are followed, and at the end of the day, that's why probably by now we haven't seen any challenge apart from the former president Peter Mutharika, who said it was quite, one of the worst run elections, but probably said that because he lost it. But as far as the nation is concerned, I think it's an election that everybody, the majority, almost everybody is saying it was properly done. Maybe I should stop there. On a lighter note, yes, there's the Times Radio there, and when Boris Johnson was supposed to do a launch interview, the audience was coming to our own Times Radio in Malawi. For us, it was hilarious. Of course, in terms of brand presence, now we are known in the UK, and we're happy about it that our radio is known in the UK. Maybe I should stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A very apt point to make on your Independence Day.
Thank you.
I think if I can, before I move to the next speakers, I should probably have mentioned that I will be demitting the chair after the next couple of speakers. We'll have a time for question and answer and discussion. And to facilitate that discussion, probably the simplest thing is that if you feel moved to ask a question, if you can indicate in the chat box by putting the letter R for request to speak, and I'll try to get round everybody if there's time after the following two speakers. And after that, I'll demit the chair to Patrick Grady MP. But our next speaker, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Dr. Sunduzwayo Madise, who's the Dean of the School of Law and the Chancellor at Chancellor College, who will be speaking from a legal and academic perspective. He's also an interest in human rights, being a commissioner at the Human Rights Commission, and was an observer at the recent, or some of the recent elections, and we very much look forward to hearing from him. I think you may need to unmute. I think we might be having technical problems there. We can see you, but we can't hear you, unfortunately. Perhaps if I go to the next speaker so we can give you time to see if you can fix that and we can come back to you. Okay. In that case, our next speaker for the moment is Mrs. Vera Kamtukule, who's the Chief Executive of the Malawi-Scotland Partnership, who many of us will know her and have worked with her, and will be able to tell us from a civic perspective about her own involvement working with a group of 120 respected Malawian professionals, volunteering to form an official connection with Scotland, and some of the achievements that there have been there, as well as any observations on recent events. So we look forward to hearing from Mrs. Kamtukule.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can, yeah. We can't see you.
You can't see me, but I think you can hear me because my bandwidth is very low. So if I use a video, I think I might be affected.
Before you begin, can I encourage other people who are not speaking just now to switch off their videos, and that may help. But I'll leave it to you. On you go.
Okay. No, thank you so much. So as you know, the Malawi-Scotland Partnership is non-partisan. So I had to take leave from my office to set up a team of professionals. And I think just a bit of a background, usually when elections are happening, professionals don't do anything. We are the ones that go to vote and we go back home, sit in our homes and then wait for the results. we leave election monitoring to volunteers that probably have nothing to do, and then we whine after things have gone wrong and so on. So I think I was thinking to myself to say, what is it that we could do as professionals that are savvy in various sectors to help the election? And I think for me, the key thing was, in the absence of international observers, what is it that we could do to beef up the capacity that the MEC had? Now, even though the Malawi Electoral Commission didn't send out an SOS saying that they needed observers or they needed help in any way, we felt that it was within our duty as citizens to ensure that we helped to deliver a credible and free election. And so we mobilized over 300 something professionals across the country, but because of logistics and communication challenges, we were only able to have 120 working on 3 days before the election day, and also on the election day, and even a few days after the elections. So we were able to get results in real time from the district tally centers, but also from polling stations, and so on and so forth. But the key thing that we noticed was the vigilance of the citizens to ensure that their vote was protected. I think this is something that we had never seen before in our nation, where ordinary citizens are saying, we want to stay to ensure that we protect our vote. And it was very interesting in some communities, because according to law, you're not supposed to be within 100 meters of the polling station, but we had a lot of citizens being within the 100-meter parameter just to ensure that their votes were not were accounted for. And immediately after the results had been posted, we saw people taking photos and being proud of themselves. That I think this is a true reflection of their vote. But the other thing was the COVID-19, which I think the CEO has ably articulated. There was no observation of any measures whatsoever. I should commend them. They tried their best to ensure that we had hand washing basins, we had soap, we had everything. But even the officials that were running the elections were not even protected themselves. So it was very difficult to observe the COVID-19 prevention measures that have been set up by the Ministry of Health. But also I think the transparency of how everything was done among the election clerks, everybody, the presiding officers, everyone that was there, because even ourselves as observers, we're not supposed to be engaged in maybe signing of results or anything like that, but I think we were being included in whatever it is was happening, because out of all the 115 or 120 or so, we never got any report saying that they were excluded or they were being maltreated in any way, apart from one incident when one of our observers, which was myself, I was nearly stoned in one of the communities that I had gone, because I was a roving observer, so I had access to a lot of polling centers. I was nearly stoned because I was being suspected of carrying in my vehicle, I think, ballots that were already marked. I think there was a lot of rumor mongering during these elections, and there was a lot of fake news happening, and this highly compromised the security of the staff, but also the people that were working on the elections, and including the observers ourselves. But of course, luckily, I wasn't stoned. I was rescued by the police and some army officials. But be that as it may, we saw the coordination of the Malawi Defense Force, the police, as well as the Malawi Electoral Commission, to ensuring that this was done in a very peaceful and orderly manner. So I think in a nutshell, that's what I can say. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That was a very interesting contribution, Mrs. Kamtukule, and again indicated how difficult it was to separate the issues around COVID from the issues around ensuring the fair workings of the election and some of the tasks that you faced. I'm going to go back now to Dr. Madise to see if we can get a sound connection there. Is Dr. Madise there?
Yeah. I hope you can hear me now.
We hear you. I'll not take up any more of your time. I would only say to everybody else that We will try to have, as I say, a short question and answer. I can't promise to fit everyone in, but if people who want to ask a question of anyone or everyone, if you could please indicate in the chat box now that you'd like to speak.
Okay, thank you. I think as the CEO of the Electoral Commission, Mr. Alfandika said, this was a court-ordered election, unprecedented in many ways, because in most parts of Africa, whenever you have petitions going to the courts, usually the courts will say something like, oh yeah, there were irregularities, but they didn't affect the election. But here we now had a situation where the court said there were irregularities and they did affect the election. So it was interesting how the Electoral Commission did approach this particular election. And it was also interesting how the chairperson, Dr. Kachale, who's a sitting judge of the High Court, time and again emphasized on following what the court had said and also following the law. So I'll say a few things that were very important. Things like ensuring that the processes were according to law. So for example, when they finished counting at the stations, the results were taken to the districts. In the previous year, they had been taken to another place called the Constitution Talent Center. The court said that this was illegal. It shouldn't have been done because that talent center is not in the law. So they were taken straight. And as Sam Alfandika said, as well as Judge Kasakula, the posting of the results, which was a novel thing that the committee came up with, was a brilliant idea. I mean, some of us already knew the election results at midnight of the first day, because you were able to tally all this information, and if you put it in a computer and a spreadsheet, you had an idea of how the election had gone. But the other thing that was also done properly was that the results were not transmitted electronically, which was a problem in the other election. So it was physically transmitted. So the district commissioners, these are the people in charge of the districts, they came with a squadron of the police and the army, and they came with a physical computer, as well as information that they had written on a manual notebook. And this was then entered into the servers of the Electoral Commission, whilst everyone was saying. The other thing that the Electoral Commission also did well was the resolution of disputes. In the past election, the court had taken the commission to task for delegating duties which they should not have delegated. So essentially they had delegated to the Secretariat the resolution of disputes, which the law says must be done by the commissioners. So this was properly done. And also the chairperson ensured that he explained to Malawians through the various press briefings of the complaints that they had received, what they had done, and how they had communicated to the complainants, and also what Malawians should know. So in a way, by the time we were finishing the election was being announced, all the complaints that had gone to the Electoral Commission, at least at the National Talent Center, had been dealt with. And he also allowed the people who are unsatisfied to go to the court. So I would say that compared to all elections I've seen, and I've observed all the elections since 1994 except one, I would say that this was the best managed and best organized election, which was interesting because this was the one that was organized in the least amount of time and with essentially a new commission. But I would say that from a legal perspective, they did very well. And I think it was because of the way they did it that there was a lot of acceptance, except as Georgia said, that the former president took time to castigate. Not surprising because he castigated the process throughout. So I think I've just got about 10 seconds, so let me stop for now.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Madise. In that case, would like to invite comments. I have 2 or 3 in here just now. Some of them will be directed to different people. Again, if you want to speak, please put an R or another indication of some kind in the chat box just now. But Joyce Juma Firi wanted to ask a question, and then Alex Sukali. I'll take those 2 together and then see if anyone wants to comment on what they have to say. So first of all, Joyce Juma Firi, please.
And the whole group. Oh, sorry. I was speaking to myself. Thanks, Alasdair, for giving me the opportunity, and thanks. Welcome to my fellow Malawians. I'm the chair of the Association of Malawians in Scotland, and today being the Independence Day, I mean, you can't even feel, you can't understand how jubilant we feel. And we thank MEC this time around for having a transparent election and making sure that the voice of Malawians are heard. We are a bit concerned because of the division that's happened in Malawi now. We see the southern region kind of like away from the other regions. And I would like to maybe find out from the fellow Malawians that what's gonna happen now? How are we gonna work together so that the whole country comes together as one? And from a diaspora point of view, we welcome the new government, and we hope that they extend their arm to work the Malawians in diaspora, because we are losing out in terms of skills transfer. So we would like to maybe Vera and George and Sam and Dr. Madise to present that a message to the government on behalf of us, that us in the diaspora, we are very, very keen to come and help our government back home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take the next question from Alec Sukali, which is, I think, directed at Mr. Alfandika, and it's about null and void votes, I think, judging by the chat box, but I'll leave it to you.
Thank you very much. I think there are a few reasons for the few null and void votes. The first one is because we're dealing with one election, the presidential. And now there was little confusion from the general populace in terms of how to deal with that. I think that's one fact we have to know. The second one is that we're just coming out of the tripartite elections in 2019. A year later, you are handling another election. So it was easy for people to remember what they had done in 2019 and replicate in 2020. So I think those two things have helped reducing the null and void votes. And I think what we need to do, learning from this particular election, is to ensure that there is that continuous civic and voter education in our activities to maintain the momentum. Thank you.
I don't know if that answers your question. Alex, did you want to come in again? Okay, if not, in that case, I have a question from Stuart McMillan, MSP.
Thank you, Alasdair. I'm not really sure actually who the question should be directed to, so if somebody would like to come in, I'd be grateful. I'm on the executive committee of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, and it was 2 years ago that the CPA published the recommended benchmarks for democratic legislatures. And I think it would be useful, after what I've heard tonight, it would be quite useful if some type of short report could be sent to the CPA so that it's something that they could consider and potentially certainly send out to other members and other parliaments across the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Stuart. I think with time not on our side now, I'll just ask if anyone who is one of our speakers today wants to add anything to any of those questions or comments. Please just speak. Don't go through the formalities of pressing a button. Just speak.
Okay, if I can say something about the issue of the null and void votes, I think some and the Electoral Commission may wish to do an analysis of the literacy levels, because these null and void votes were particularly large in specific areas. So they were not spread across the whole country evenly. So they may find that there is a direct correlation between levels of literacy and the null and void votes. But it's something that maybe the Electoral Commission may have to look at and see how they can respond to that issue. Thank you.
I would also like to to add something?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I think from what Dr. Madise is saying, for me, even the MEC maybe should come up with a criteria even for monitoring of elections, because I think what we also observed was that even the level of education of some monitors could not even write, you know, but because they have volunteered themselves to be available to monitor an election, then they were brought on board by their respective parties. For me, I think that was wrong. And now you can understand somebody that doesn't even understand the system is now giving direction to somebody that also doesn't understand the system as well. So I think for me, that's why those null and votes would come about. So I think for me, the MEC would need to have an overhaul in terms of how all these things is done, because I think the MEC doesn't have a say in terms of who monitors an election. That is a prerogative of the respective parties.
I see Sam has his hand up, and then I think that will have to be the last speaker in this section before I hand over the chair.
Yes, I just wanted to make a quick comment from what Dr. Sunduzwayo Madise said. Yes, I will do an analysis on quite a number of things, including the null and void votes. But looking at the 2020 election, most of the null and void votes we examined, because we examined each one of them, were coming from protest voters who were deliberately cancelling everybody and say, none of these, I'm not voting for any one of you. And those were massive. And I think if we did have those protest voters, we could have done so much better in terms of null and void votes. With regard to the monitors, yes, indeed, some of the monitors leave quite a lot to be desired. But you know, we are not in control of who the monitor should be from the political parties. This time around, there were quite a number of stakeholders, NGOs who capacitated the monitors before the election. I think if that continues, and if quite a lot is done or is said regarding the quality of monitors that should be sponsored by political parties, I think we can improve as a country in this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And with that, I won't take up more of your time other than to thank all our speakers for a very interesting insight into the elections, and to hand over to someone you know well, who is representing the UK contingent, of the UK Parliament contingent here just now, Patrick Grady MP.
Thanks, Alasdair. And a very happy Independence Day to all of our Malawian friends on the call. I see that President Chakwera has given a very well-received inaugural address today, so I think the APPG and the CPG have an interesting, and you know, Malawi as a whole has a very interesting time ahead of it, and we look forward as parliamentarians to supporting the country in whatever way we can in the months and years to come. Just to add to the welcomes that Alasdair gave, I think in addition to the people he identified from the two parliaments, I see we also have Sarah Boyack, Maureen Watt, Linda Fabiani and Stuart McMillan from the Scottish Parliament, and Richard Thompson, Alison Thewlis, Anne McLaughlin, Martin Day, Wendy Chamberlain, David Mundell and Lord McConnell from Westminster. And apologies if there's still someone on the call who hasn't had a name check on the parliamentary side. The next short period of the meeting is to go into a bit more detail, and Sam touched on this, on the impact of COVID in the country. I know the Scotland-Malawi Partnership has organised a series of very well received meetings and briefings, but this I think will be a very useful opportunity for parliamentary colleagues to hear how Malawi is adapting to and responding to the challenge of COVID. So the same process, about 4 or 5 minutes for each of the speakers, and then a little bit of time for discussion. Our first speaker is Professor Mwapatsa Mipando, who's the principal of the School of Medicine in Blantyre. We're delighted to have you with us, Professor, and if you'd like to just begin the presentation.
Thank you very much, everybody, and it's a pleasure to join again. The figures Sam has already mentioned, I think just for those that are joining in, as of yesterday, we were at 1,742, And yesterday alone, we had 129. Of those, we have 317 that have recovered. And deaths as of yesterday, I was checking so that I could bring new ones today, but they are not yet out. We have 19th death, and those that have that are active in terms of the disease itself, we are currently at 1,406. And from the national side, I think there are a number of things that we have done well. In terms of when the first case, before we even got the case, we had closure of schools. We had messages going out. I think that was done well. And in terms of churches and gatherings, they were restricted. That was very well done. And even the enhancement of hand washing, that was also well done at every entry point. And the cultural change in terms of handshaking, people had stopped that. Things that we didn't do well is that crowd control during the rallies, I think was not well done. And I think that has already been done. You go to funerals and weddings, market side, on the roadside, that was not well done. Use of face mask, until recently, not many people were using that. And in terms of the hand hygiene, if you would wash the hand when getting into the building, but once you are in there, people had assumed the security, thinking that things are well. If you look at the observation, we are seeing that more and more healthcare workers are getting infected. This is not only new to Malawi unique, but because all over, I think that's a case. In terms of case fatality, of the people that are infected, the case fatality, we are still at around 1.6%, because we have the 19 out of the 1,742. What is though a bit scary is that for those that are, when you go into the admission, the percentage we are at 43, and that partly is because of maybe health-seeking measures that people are delayed in terms of going for admission, and also in terms of what we have in the isolation centers that needs to be looked at. What are the aims going forward? We are hoping that there will be more and more coordination. We didn't see it there, and I can tell you as a fact, being a college, we are involved in that. The new government is looking at strengthening how we should coordinate, because one of the fears is that most of the attention went to COVID, and the other diseases didn't have the support that is supposed to be required. Malaria, TB, HIV. So I know that one of the things that the government is thinking is to have a coordination where a specific coordination unit will oversee the COVID. That will need support. I know that there are a number of sectors that are coming in, but we do hope that we will improve. The other thing that we are hoping that we'll see is that the message from what the government has done, and I think cancellation of the inauguration today and the president coming 2 times in a row in 2 days to speak about COVID, and also the wearing in of masks, I think that is already sending a strong, very strong signal. And I am aware that they are indeed consulting in terms of making sure that whatever we are doing is really appropriate for Malawi rather than just taking from the outside, because there has to be a balance between the social activities and the disease itself. And in terms of what we can do also, in terms of what we need to do more, they still need to strengthen up. If people get sick, what happens in the isolation centers, I think that needs to be strengthened, and that we have brought it across. We still need to improve the human resource. And one unique thing about Malawi is that our public health, it's already strong, because we have what we call as HSAs, health surveillance assistants. And I know that they want to employ. We are hoping that within the shortest time, every district will have these health surveillance assistants. That will help us in the community mobilization, because we are hoping that it will be decentralized rather than how it was at the moment. So there are things that we are also hoping that, I know the president alluded to that, and I am privy to that, that there is equipment that is coming, and we are hoping that people within the shortest time can be trained in the proper use of this equipment, not forgetting targeted maybe surveillance that is required. We look at the rural people that, like masks, they cannot get hold of that. So there is need to make sure that whatever we are doing, we are not also disadvantaging the people in the rural areas. The academy has been asked quite a lot from there, and I know that that's where we will go to make sure that the academy, in terms of coming up with things that are appropriate to Malawi, research that is appropriate to Malawi, even behavioral changes that we need to do. And I am aware that they are looking at that. So there will be behavior change modification, care practices at communities, and clinical care in the hospitals. Otherwise, thank you very much for the time.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Professor Mipando. Our second speaker, and as previously, anyone that has questions, and I can see a couple have indicated already, if they can do so in the chat room. Our next speaker will be Professor Paul Garside, who's the Dean of Global Engagement, for Africa and the Middle East at the University of Glasgow. So, Paul, if you'd like to give us your presentation, please.
Thanks very much, Patrick, and thank you to all of you. And wishing you a happy Independence Day to everybody in Malawi. I wish I could be there to enjoy it with you, but unfortunately I can't at the moment, but as soon as possible. So I would just like to say, actually, echo something that Patrick said and was mentioned, the excellent coordination meetings that have been run by Scotland-Malawi Partnership. And I think that has been one of the key things, and I know that has really helped Mwapatsa. And I think the presence of Mwapatsa and some of his senior colleagues from the civil service who've been involved in getting ready to deal with the pandemic in Malawi, and that coordination, I think, has been key in what's been happening in Malawi. From the perspective from Scotland, from higher education organisations in Scotland, I think, again, the Scotland-Malawi Partnership coordination meetings have made sure that we didn't have duplication of effort, that everything was coordinated together, and that we could provide the help and the assistance that was asked for directly from Malawi in consultation with Malawi. And I think that has been very important. So things like making sure that the reagents and the protocols for all of the testing, there was lots of support for those kinds of things. And also making sure that the capacity for these testing centres will be present in the future. I think one of the things, and I think Mwapatsa mentioned this, one of the things that will be very important, and it's particularly pertinent, I think, on Independence Day in Malawi, is Malawi's independence in having the capacity should such a pandemic happen again. So the laboratory capacity, the expertise to do all of the things that it needs to do. And to do that in partnership, obviously, with institutions in Scotland. And I think also that's important because of context. So the contextualization of what the virus may do may be very different in Malawi in the face of obviously a different population, obviously different infection challenges, and obviously subsequently the outcome, what post-COVID consequences are, will be different in Malawi than they are in Scotland. Some will be the same, some will be different. So being able to do that research post-COVID, I think is important. And I think it's critically important, therefore, that the research capacity that people like Mwapatsa are building at the College of Medicine is key. And a lot of the universities across Scotland have redirected some funding from other things to help with the initial stages of the COVID response. And I know also that lots of GCRF funding and SFC GCRF funding has been redirected to COVID response, but also now to post-COVID response. So how is this dealt with, the health consequences of this dealt with as Malawi hopefully comes out of the pandemic after that. And I think really my congratulations go to Scotland-Malawi Partnership, but also to Mwapatsa and his colleagues. They're on the ground and they've been doing an excellent job coordinating that. And I think that's really all that I wanted to say. And I'm happy to answer any questions that I can.
Thank you, Paul. I think that the points about funding possibly link to the final point that we have on the agenda as well about DFID and FCO merger. There's a few questions have been indicated in the chat. Moses Nkono, first of all, Alex Sakali and Nigel Harper have both written their questions down, but I'll call them briefly to articulate them as well. But Moses, first of all.
Thank you so much. Really, my questions are two. I think one is going to Dr. Madise, and the other one will be going to Mr. Alfandika. Are you hearing me?
Yes, you're quite quiet, and just be aware we're a little bit pushed for time. We're trying to focus on COVID in this section, but please go ahead with your questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, right. On COVID, I think I heard Professor Mipando when he was presenting. I really wanted to know, it's been a while since I've been out of Malawi now, but I would like to hear, looking at the exponential increase of the infection, the COVID infection in Malawi, and I think that's what led the president to cancel the celebrations today. What has Malawi done? Where are we, or what steps has Malawi done apart from advising the general populace to maybe social distancing or wash their hands and stuff? What steps has Malawi taken? I was thinking that would it be good probably to have locational isolations, like there are areas in Malawi, like in Blantyre, maybe in the Mwawa, or you have Nyambadwe, you have Chitawira, or in Lilongwe you have, say, 825 Kawali, stuff, to have isolations in those particular locations and to check whether to do comprehensive testing. What has Malawi done to contain COVID, the spread of COVID? It seems it's spreading at an exponential rate, and it's scary the way it is doing. Every day we're hearing, like today, 120 something. That's not a small number. That's a big number.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I think there's a couple of questions related to that, so we'll take them all together. Alec Sukali and Heather Kubi both asking about mapping.
Yep. Hello, everybody. Happy birthday, Malawi. My question to Professor Mipando is, do we have, as of now, this far, an idea of which areas are most highly hit, so you can have a kind of mapping? And if so, how do you intend to implement some form of containment for those areas so that it doesn't spread, overflow to other areas which were a bit now more safer than others? Thank you.
Okay, and Heather Kubi, I think your question's related to that.
Yes, not so much mapping of the areas, but mapping of risk factors, particularly for the severe disease. And are these becoming apparent, and are they any different from those in Scotland, the UK, or Europe even?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And then I'll take Nigel, and then we'll take another quick round. So Nigel.
Hi there. Yeah, my question is just about the coordination internationally with the neighbouring countries, whether there's any adverse effects by the neighbours taking slightly different approaches, in particular Tanzania, and whether SADC has any role to play in some sort of overall coordination.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think most of them, Mwapatsa, were directed to you, if you're able to reflect on those, Professor Mipando.
So first and foremost, in terms of the mapping, we are not doing active surveillance at the moment. It's actually people that are feeling sick, or they have, in terms of where they have traveled. People have talked about active tracing and active surveillance, but we haven't yet started that. So we wouldn't know exactly where people are. But I know that we have hotspots. I think the cities, that's what we are seeing, Blantyre, Lilongwe, and a bit of Mangochi, but it is also connected to people where they are returning from. Most of the returnees, over 650 that we got from South Africa. I think the northern area also, we were affected because we received goods and the people still traveling to Tanzania. We saw a number of cases coming from there associated with Tanzania. We think we need to do surveillance, but it will require quite a lot of investment. As I'm talking now, we have run out of testing materials, partly because of the logistics. The government had money to bring these, and we are getting the support, maybe we hope through UNICEF or any other, so that we can do the testing. So even the normal testing, we are struggling at the moment. I know Blantyre and other areas are difficult. In terms of risk factors, we don't have yet specifically for Malawi, but we are taking from what normally we are seeing in South Africa, HIV and others. But in terms of research, I know that with Glasgow College of Medicine, we are trying to see the same thing where we want to compare the Scottish using the Blantyre to Blantyre lab and what we are seeing in Malawi. So we are hoping that we'll get a funding where we are going to do exactly that, because we think the lessons learned can be comparable. Isolations, I think in the regions, in the areas, only if you know the hotspots. We tried a little bit to do with Mpingo, where we have Malawians of Asian origin, because we had the support from theirs. But what we saw there were very few people. So meaning that the community practices that we were doing were very good. But now, because we didn't know what had gone in, that's why we are seeing the community transmission, which is very high. We think the numbers are even higher than what we have. We need to strengthen, I had already talked about the isolation. We also need to strengthen the hospitals. There was a question about ventilators. We are going to receive about 200. We had some, but what we are doing as a college now, we want to engage the ministry to have maybe a short-term training which can best be done for the usage of ventilators, because having ventilators alone is not enough. We need to have the properly trained healthcare workers. So we hope as a college we can train that. I hope I have answered almost everything that I had.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. There was a question from Enoch Bamusi, and then there's a bit of an exchange going on about food prices as well. And I don't know if any of the speakers will want to comment on that, but Enoch.
Yeah, just a quick one for Dr. Mipando there. It's just out of interest. I know the question of lockdown wasn't received very well when it was introduced previously, but from your scientific point of view, considering the way things are going, the rate in terms of how it's increasing, do you see that as still an option for Malawi? And if it's an option, what kind of mitigation measures are would we really wish to implement as a country? I mean, in case that becomes an option, if the situation continues to get worse and worse, is lockdown an option, and what measures can we really start thinking of to avoid a rejection of lockdown as was done previously?
I can answer partly because of what I know, also because of what the president talked about yesterday. If you really have to do lockdown, some of the reasons for lockdown, you really need to know where the numbers are, where if we had active surveillance, maybe we will need to have a lockdown which is specific for a particular area. But for Malawi, you see, lockdown alone is not important, because you have people that, I'll use the term that the president used yesterday, live on subsistence living on a day-to-day. So if you really have to do that, it means you have also to look at how you support the other packages, like food packages, how they are going to get their water, food, and all sorts of things. In South Africa, there was a case, I think if you read their papers, they saw an emergency of malnutrition because of the lockdown, because people didn't have that. So we don't want that, because in the end, you might end up protecting COVID, but having a lot of fatalities because of food, hunger, and other things. That's why the issue I've talked about coordination is very important, that the new government is thinking of having a coordination area where different people can come in and go and handle what I normally talk of something that is contextualized to Malawi.
Thank you. That touches on the exchange that's going on in the chat about the impact on food prices. I think given the time constraints, we might not be able to go quite down that track. I see Paul has asked about DFID FCO merger, and that was the final point on the agenda. And I wonder if we might just bring David in from Scotland Malawi to offer a little bit of perspective on that particular issue before we start to wind up.
Yeah, no problem. Happy Malawi Independence Day, everybody. I see Patrick in the background. You have a bottle of Malawi gin that you're flying the flag from Westminster. Well done, you. I'm keen to preface my points by saying the Scotland-Malawi partnership is, of course, politically neutral, and we have very strong support for what both the FCO and DFID do in Malawi. And I think Malawi is a good example of DFID and FCO working quite closely and quite well together. However, we profoundly disagree with the decision to merge DFID and the FCO, and we disagree with the Prime Minister's statements conflating diplomacy with development. We think UK aid should and must continue to be driven for moral reasons other than the UK's own political, commercial advancement. And I suppose we're concerned listening to the Prime Minister saying, questioning why Zambia is getting as much aid as the Ukraine, given Zambia doesn't have the same security interest to Britain. And we worry that ultimately DFID Malawi's work might be affected if it continues to be judged on that basis. We as a network have written to the PM and engaged the 56 Scottish MPs, where there remains an overwhelming sense of disagreement with the UK government on this issue. The decision has been made. We respect and acknowledge that. But from our perspective, there are 4 key things that are needed to safeguard particularly DFID Malawi's work. The first is obviously the 0.7% of GNI that goes towards ODA, that the UK government commits to maintaining that target, which it has. Secondly, that the ODA definition doesn't change, the definition of what makes aid. Thirdly, on transparency and accountability, that ICAI, the Independent Commission for Aid Effectiveness, continues, and there remains select committee oversight of what the UK government does on UK aid. And finally, that the DFID Malawi budget is maintained at the circa £65 million level. And we think with those 4 provisions from the UK government, DFID Malawi wouldn't be too badly affected by this, but we do disagree with the merger overall. Patrick, back to you.
Thank you, David. I have a feeling most people on the call are, will understand where the Scotland-Malawi partnership's coming from on that. There will be a debate on the effects of the merger as part of the estimates process here in the House of Commons on Thursday, and that might give us a bit of a sense of the overall view in Parliament. But I think, as you say, the merger is going ahead, so the question now is how we make sure that the priorities that are important to Malawi and our different areas of interests are protected. And I know Lord McConnell chairs the all-party parliamentary group on the Sustainable Development Goals, and they'll be taking a close interest on what happens next as well. I think we should probably draw it to a close. We had advertised this to last for about an hour, and we're just over that. I think, as with a lot of COVID, we're learning things that we're starting to think, why on earth didn't we do this before now? We did have quite a good virtual joint meeting of the APG and the CPG before, but I think we're establishing a precedent here that will allow it to happen more frequently in the future, and it's absolutely tremendous to be joined by colleagues from Malawi. Perhaps we'll be able to get a joint parliamentary caucus at some point as well. Alasdair, I don't know if you've got any final words as the chair from the opening session.
No, that's great. I thought that was useful. As you say, I'm not sure why we've not done this before. The only thing I would add would really be to endorse what David has just said, which is about the fact that, yes, we want to try and be as politically cooperative and neutral as we can, but we can't do anything other than criticise anything that moves towards a situation where aid is determined by anything other than need.
Okay, thank you. I suspect all of this will come up, and we've got the opportunity now for future meetings. I think on that note, then, we should certainly let at least our Malawian colleagues get back to their Independence Day celebrations. So my thanks again to Sam from the Electoral Commission, George from Times TV, Sundu from Chancellor College, Vera from Malawi Scotland Partnership, Mwapatsa from the School of Medicine in Blantyre, and Paul, who joined us from Glasgow. And to the many parliamentarians, we've had an absolutely fantastic turnout, better than we might normally have at physical meetings, actually, and all the different civil society and individual members of the group as well. Thank you all, and happy birthday, Malawi, once again. Thank you, everyone. Yep.
Thank you. Zikomo kwambiri.
Zikomo.
Zikomo kwambiri.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.